Hello, is this thing on? Are we on live here in Hollywood, California? Good morning, Mark. Looking forward to this episode. Yeah, so am I. Hi, Mark. Hi, Scott. Hi, Mike. Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome, Robin Christmas. Welcome, Tommy Bridges, an old friend. What's up? This is a story of an old friend, which I'm going to get into and explain. I've already got spilkus over this thing. I don't know why. I'm getting emotional already about Gilbert. We were pretty close for a long time, and I'm going to get into that. We were kind of born like a month or two apart and same neighborhood, and there's just so much similarity between Gilbert and myself, and there's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of cultural icons and similarities and things that we really shared in common for many years, and there's a lot of secrets in Gilbert's life that I'm going to try. I don't mean like, you know, dark secrets, but secret stuff that people don't realize about Gilbert. And I wanted to do this as a tribute to Gilbert because people think they know what he was about, but he was very private and did not let his guard down very often. Let me just put it that way. And people did try to break through that persona. But there was a person there. But that being said, you're not going to hear anything more from me until you like and subscribe to the channel. And I'm going to wait. I'm just going to wait here until you subscribe. I'm going to read some periodicals here while you do what you have to do, you people in the chat. If you haven't liked and subscribed, Tom, thanks. I knew you were on the big board already, but you may have some friends who haven't, some scurrilous cats who are trying to avoid the inevitable. Increasing the subscription numbers, by the way, allows me to get guests, and that's the only reason I give a shit. For some reason, because PR people look at it and they say yes or no immediately. So it would be great if you subscribe now and got it over with. I know some of you have suffered from thalidomide injuries and may have stumps as arms. Some of you might not have the maybe listening on some sort of platform audio wise and not have the button. But if you go home or you could do it now, it would really be helpful, as I said, to get guests. So the guests, we have some coming up. The Comedy Life of Dave Rubin is coming up, and we're going to have Larry Charles back. Next week, we're doing another tribute to another close friend of mine, Richard Lewis, who passed a couple of years ago. I never got a chance to really do a deep dive on, and people will be amazed as to the life of Richard Lewis, who I was also surprisingly close to. The Kinnison and Dice shows, I mean, met them and knew them, but Richard Lewis and Gilbert were actually close friends. But the other two guys were not, but I just did those shows because I was a huge fan. As are the rest of the episodes are basically going to be, shows about stuff that I'm into that I need and wanted to dig into anyway. Jonathan Winters, we're going to do Seinfeld, Michael Richards, who ends up in Problem Child as the bow tie killer, which I highly recommend, by the way. But before we do that, have you people subscribed? What am I sitting here for? Have you done this yet? I mean, get it over with so we could start the show. All right, go ahead. Okay, you done? All right. Well, let's talk about Biltong for 1 second here. Biltong USA. Anton, the incredible Biltong man out of Texas, Prairie, Texas, batting .392 for the Rangers. Apparently came from South Africa, from the minor league affiliate of the Texas Rangers. Now with his family and kids working, violating all the child labor laws, if they still have them in Texas, to make this incredible product. Hold on, where is mine? Biltong. Here it is. Here's mine. This is what I'm going to be eating after the show, watching the Dodgers getting swept by the Phillies. Real torture last night, losing 6-5 again. This whole series of the Phillies is a disaster, but not a disaster if you've got the Biltong pure protein, super duper gourmet, natural keto, everything. Look at this. It comes out of Roanoke, Texas. I'm getting like already a desire to eat this, but I can't because it'll clog up my mouth. But This will help you have a protein-based snack instead of eating chips, which is why I do it. And like I said, I heat it up for a couple of seconds, like 5 seconds in the microwave, and the juices start flowing, and it's really delicious. He's got an entire selection in that menu down there. And if you use the secret agent code of Mark G, you get 10% off, and he ships it to your house with ice in a little box. And it's really a great, great service to this guy who is a recent arrival in the United States. And I'm trying to help his family develop the American dream. And so far, so good with this guy, Anton, and his wife. Yeah, wow. Yeah, watch it during the show. I mean, eat it while you're watching the show. Thanks, Robin. Apparently, according to Anton, the fans of the show are buying the hell out of this thing and really enjoying it. He's very happy with the show. To me, the whole thing is shocking. We even have a show, but and a sponsor and everything else. But the whole thing is kind of crazy. But really try to support Biltong USA. He's also got desserts on there, which I wish he would send me already before I have to take a gun and go down to Texas and get these desserts myself. But probably better off without the desserts at this point in my fat life. Okay, so Biltong USA, go to the website, order, use code Mark G. You get 10% off. He ships it right to your door with bags of ice and everything else, UPS. And you'll be eating it like Robin is and having a great time watching the show. Here's another in awe of Mark's knowledge, Rob, but your humor is epic. Watch America's Untold Stories like everyone hugs from from Korea. Yeah, big fans in Korea. Thanks, Dina. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, you think you're I'm in Hollywood for Christ's sakes, and but the audience is all over the world, especially for both the channels. This being a new venture, but it's not that radical for me because this stuff is so a part of my life, having been at National Lampoon, having produced Mambo Mouth with Leguizamo, who we're going to do a deep dive on, having produced Mo Funny Black Comedy in America for HBO, which I did, I think, in 1991, which is the definitive documentary on African American comedy. Anyway, so comedy, and I've been in improv groups. I've done stand up, so it's not unusual for me to focus on this. Um, that being said, I've written comedy too, so there's that. But let's get into this thing with Gilly, I just can't believe he's gone. It's so weird, because I moved to the West Coast and he was in New York, and then he moved to Boca, and I didn't see him, but I did see him at a benefit the year before he died. So I'll get to that at the end, but Max Gottfried, Lillian Zimmerman somehow hook up and create this family of Karen. This is Gilbert here, obviously probably about 4 or 5, but there's a sister Arlene, and there's also another sister named Karen, and they live as a family in Coney Island, where I grew up. My grandfather was there. This is Arlene later. I knew Arlene as well. She was a fairly famous photographer for the New York Times, and she did do an assignment for me when I was running MTV Magazine. So this is the three of them here: Karen, Gilbert, and Arlene. The family is working class, and I mean working class. The father ran a hardware store with the grandfather down below the apartment. This is his dad. This is Max Gottfried, who didn't understand what the hell his kids were about because of, spun into the 60s and 70s. Gilbert and I were almost exactly the same age. We were separated by literally, I think, 80 or 70 to 60 days or something from February to May. This is the dad. Now, the dad, extremely hardworking, could literally rewire an apartment. Gilbert had none of those skills. The dad had this hardware store, and I can just tell you one story Gilbert told me about the about the hardware store. His dad, among other things, sold glue. And when the glue craze started in New York, look, I was 13, everybody was doing glue. These kids were coming in and buying airplane glue, not from models, but to get high. So New York City, this must have been Jesus, 60, 55, 1965, 68, let's say, 68. People are buying glue, and the city of New York passes an ordinance. I don't know if anybody remembers this, that you can't just buy glue. You got to buy a model to go with the glue. So his dad had this model, old model airplane kit, and these kids would buy, he'd force them to buy the model airplane kit when they bought the glue, and they would throw the kit in the garbage, and he would dig it out and resell it over and over and over again with the glue to abide by the city ordinance. Now, he was also, him and his uncle were arrested for selling party poppers, which are those things you pull the string. This was really bizarre. You pull the string and confetti comes out, but there's some little minor explosive in there. And that was some bizarre city ordinance. And they came in and literally kidnapped, handcuffed his uncle, who was the partner of his father, and took him downtown and arrested him for selling party poppers. Um, I don't. This is much later here with Joe Piscopo, but uh, he at 8 years old he begins to put it this way. Okay, put it this way. The family vacation they went on. He told me that they rented a bungalow in Brighton Beach. This was the only time they ever went on vacation. Now, from where he lived and where I lived, you could walk to Brighton Beach. So his father rented this dilapidated cottage, and it rained all weekend. He said, "Enjoy the vacation." It was the only time they went away as a family. But at the age of 8, he goes away to a Jewish camp in the Catskills, and he said to me, I forget the name of the camp, but it rhymed with Auschwitz. And he got a T-shirt that said, "I survived the camp." And it had a hammer and sickle on it and a swastika. I mean, he's making this up, but I mean, that was Gilbert's humor. The camp counselors honored Hiroshima Day by having the kids tape their eyes to the side of their heads and run through the woods yelling "Banzai." Um, but he did have he was not a class clown. People don't really get his personality. Gilbert was very introverted in school, but he was really into movie monsters, and he would watch TV. He did not have his own room in this small apartment above the hardware store, but his bed was in the dining room. And what else was in the dining room? The TV set. So Gilbert spent his entire life, young life, watching TV. And among the things we bonded on was Popeye and the Three Stooges. And the Three Stooges had Officer Joe Bolton, who was some corrupt New York City cop. And he would come out and introduce the Three Stooges. And Captain Jack McCarthy would come out dressed as a captain, a naval captain, and he would ring this bell and it'd say 8 bells and all's well, and introduce Popeye. And Gilbert and I bonded because this is exactly what everyone did in our neighborhoods back then. Was watch Popeye and the Three Stooges, Chuck McCann, just for laughs. Uh, all of that TV was so in line because we were exactly the same age. But Gilbert got into movie monsters. He got into Lon Chaney, got into Boris Karloff, he got into Bela Lugosi, and he was an expert on these B and C movie monster schlock films. And that was, I really wasn't into it that much. He was completely addicted to it. And he would actually do impressions of all of them that were impeccable. His mother does not know what to do with him. So she sends him, he gets these report cards back. He somehow I've wrangled a few of his report cards. I just want to show you. By the way, this is Gilbert as a little baby. For people who have never seen the Gilbert baby photos, this is a picture of his mother, Lillian, and you had to have those cat glasses back in the day. Take a look at those cat glasses because that was mandatory for a Jewish woman who lived in Coney Island, I think. And there's a couple of report cards here. I want to show you this. This is, don't ask me how I got these. These are some photos of some of his report cards. And this is 1967. It says Gilbert's capable of better work. He has to try and be more outgoing. He is very quiet and keeps to himself, rather than play with other boys. Now, people may think that that's crazy, but that's the way he was. And he was not, this is, this is a good one. Look at this here. This is a good one. Gilbert shows little effort in his schoolwork. Okay. Um, but then somebody, one of the teachers, realizes that Gilbert has some expertise. And it says Gilbert excels in art. His cartoon characters, frequently the children enjoy this. Please further this gift of this child. So one of his teachers sees through this introverted kid and realizes that he has an incredible skill to draw. So his mother enrolls him at the Brooklyn Academy of Art, Brooklyn Museum of Art. I take that back. The Brooklyn Museum of Art had some art classes for kids. And he goes in there and he creates a paper mache monsters that kind of look. This is one of the paper mache monster masks. I don't have it in color. Maybe we have it in color if we could show that. Let's see if we have it in color, by the way. I don't know if we do. No, I guess it's in black and white. Okay. But this is one that he created at his art class at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. So they wrote him up. This is like a write-up. Yeah, here it is. A write-up when he was 12. Dig this. Fierce teeth, strong black yarn eyebrows, and mustache, and supersonic eyeballs might cause you to wonder why Gilbert Gottfried, age 12, made this brilliant orange mask cry red felt tears. And then it goes on. It came from Rhonda Seidman, 12, who had her own thing. Maybe they had a little fling. I'm not really sure about Rhonda Seidman. But here it is. This is a junior membership write up by the Brooklyn Museum of Art. Quite impressive at an early age. And Gilbert kind of isolates in the apartment while here's a picture of him. This is more accurate, probably, of a kid isolated, looking forlorn and quiet. And he will focus on his little artwork things. But he also begins to do impressions. And he does impressions for his parents, and he does impressions for his sisters, Arlene and Karen. And oddly enough, he does like Groucho Marx. He dresses up as Groucho Marx, and he does impressions of all these weird characters from Hollywood history. He does impressions of Lon Chaney. He does impressions of Bela Lugosi. He does impressions of Peter Lorre. But he does them as offbeat impressions. He just doesn't do them right from the movies. He does them. He will later do one that David Letterman loved immensely, where he would come on and in fact, I've seen him do it a million times, as did all the comics in New York, where he would do Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason in Casablanca. And it just destroyed the planet Earth. He was able to switch from Ralph Cramden in Casablanca to James Mason and Richard Burton in Casablanca. He was an impeccable impressionist, absolutely scary how good he was in impersonating people. And he used this around the family. So the family one day says, "Why don't you come with us? We're going to take you by the hand at the age of 15 to a place in Greenwich Village called the Bitter End. And we're going to see if you have this ability to do this on a stage at 15. But before that, I just want to back up to the age of 14, where Gilbert gets a phony ID card that says he's about 25 years old and begins going into Manhattan to Times Square and begins to go to Show World to check out porno films, these little short porno films where you put a quarter in. Also, the slots where the window opens up. And Gilbert told me this story where the first time he shows up, he was 13. He was 13. I don't even have a picture of him at 13 here. Let's take a look. And this is what he looked like at 13, by the way, 14 years of age. They had moved to Crown Heights by this time, and it was a completely Puerto Rican neighborhood. They moved to a neighborhood that was in transition, and Gilbert began to dress and look like a Puerto Rican, and spoke Spanish. By the way, here, look at this shot of Gilbert. This is probably at 17. His father dies at 15, but this is Gilbert looking like a Mexican drug dealer. People don't realize he kind of like zeligged his way into this Puerto Rican neighborhood. Yeah, look at him there, ladies. Not so ugly now, was he? Very cute, and girls loved him despite his riff that he couldn't get laid. It was actually anyway. So yeah, this is him here. This is a shot of him in the Catskills, but there's one of him doing yoga. I don't know if you have that shot. There's a couple of shots of him. Look at this. This is on a rooftop in Brooklyn, by the way. This is Gilbert Gottfried doing yoga that nobody knew he even knew, but he was quite a spiritual cat. Back in those days, he was a yoga master. And look at this. This is him doing his whatever that they call that. I'm not sure what that is. But take a look at that face. He's right out of some Mexican cowboy movie. But he would go to this porno theater, Show World, in Times Square, and he attempted to show this ID to the guy who just cracked up laughing simply because he attempted to show ID and the guy said, like, I give a shit. And sent him in every time he showed up to go to Show World at the age of 14, by the way. Gilbert went through all these machinations to get this phony ID, which said he was like 26. And it was of no importance because the guy let him in anyway. And he was really proud of that, just getting into Show World at 14. I don't know what it meant. But his sisters took him to Hootenanny Night. Which was at the bitter end, and he described it to me as 2,000 people, 2,000 Bob Dylans trying to get noticed. And he said even the waiters were Bob Dylans, and he just said they'd come up and go, "Hey, what are you drinking, man? You want to get another Coca-Cola?" He said everybody there was either a Joan Baez impersonator or a Bob Dylan impersonator. But anyway. They took him by the hand on the subway to Greenwich Village, where he performed it the first time at the bitter end. And that was the beginning of his stand-up career. He did impressions of Groucho. There might be a photo of him dressed as Groucho in our collection. If not, maybe I could dig it out somewhere. But I think we did have one of him dressed as Groucho, which is kind of interesting. He did Groucho, Bela Lugosi, and then he went to Catch a Rising Star and started doing these Peter Lorre, Bela Lugosi things. But like I said, he did them in these surreal situations. I don't know what this is here. This is maybe him at Catch. Yeah, this is Gilbert at Catch, where he really made a home for himself. It was Rick Newman's place. Rick Newman stupidly hired my brother once and thought that the apple did not fall far from the tree, as he told me up in Montreal at the Montreal Comedy Festival. My brother went in his office overnight and rang up thousands of dollars in sex phone calls, and then he had to get fired. But this is Gilbert at Catch a Rising Star on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where he began to develop his stand-up act with his eyes open and not a yelling voice and a clean act. He did not begin to do blue humor or dirty jokes until like 2001. The Gilbert that I saw, knew and loved worked clean, extremely clean. At some point in his career, like I said, around 2001, he begins to switch and starts working very, very blue with dirty jokes. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into something. But what's this photo here? This is Gilbert. Looks like the Bottom Line. I have a recording of him at the Bottom Line. I don't know if we could play a little snippet of it. It may not be the greatest quality, but there are recordings that I made of Gilbert himself performing bootleg recordings of my own that I did for my own head, which we're going to try to post on the channel below after the show. I mean, I've got plenty of digital clean copies of Gilbert on Stern and Gilbert performing. I don't know how clean they are, but nobody's ever heard these, so I thought we might put them up after the show on the website itself. Okay, so dig this. In 1980, Gilbert auditions for Saturday Night Live, and it's Saturday Night Live. It's in his sixth year, and Lorne Michaels splits. He's done with the show, and they bring in this crazy lady, Jean Doumanian, who will later be the producer of the Woody Allen films, who will later be sued by Woody Allen for embezzling money from Woody Allen with her Euro trash husband, phony Duke or something from Europe. But that's a story for the Woody Allen show, which we're going to do. But this Gene Domanian takes over SNL and she begins to have auditions. This is the sixth season of SNL, by the way. And Gilbert described the audition to me, and he said, in the audience, because of Gene Domanian's connection to Woody Allen was there in the audience for the reviews of the filmed auditions in a little theatrical room there at Rockefeller Center. The auditions were like down below, I think on the sixth floor, 2 floors below 8H. And he auditioned doing various bits and impersonations and things like that. And Woody Allen was there with Gene Domanian reviewing his audition, didn't laugh the entire time, and said only one thing. And there were a couple of people there who commemorated this Woody Allen statement. He asked if Gilbert Gottfried was a Navajo Indian. And Gilbert never forgot this. It was the greatest moment of his life that Woody Allen thought he was a Navajo Indian for some reason. And it's not that far-fetched, because if you look at the pictures that we just showed you, I said he looked like a Mexican. I mean, take a look at this. I mean, he does look a little bit Indian kind of ethnic, either Mexican or Indian. This is him, yeah, also about that time. Interesting photo. I don't know what he's supposed to be there, but he was a secular Jew. He was never bar mitzvahed. He believed that he would be put on a train to Auschwitz. However, he fully acknowledged his Jewishness in public and private. He just wasn't religious. And most of the people in Coney Island, South Brooklyn, at that time, including my own family, were mostly secular Jews who went to shul once a year or twice. But I was bar mitzvah. He wasn't. I don't know why he wasn't. Might have been financial. But anyway, the three people on SNL that he bonds with are Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo, and himself. None of them get any screen time. None of them get any work. At one point, Gilbert plays a corpse in a coffin. He does one sketch where he impersonates Roman Polanski, another one where he does Napoleon. Eddie Murphy says the same thing. They're putting him in the back of sketches as a black Republican. Piscopo says the same thing. The three of them bond together and don't get any work in that season of the sixth season of SNL. And Gilbert hated being there. He didn't know how to work the writers. He didn't know how to work interpersonal relationships. Look, he may have been on the spectrum for all I know. He may have been autistic. I don't really know. But interpersonal activity and that kind of ambitious stuff, working with other people. I don't know. What's his photo here you had? That's him and Murphy later. That's years later. Yeah. He will get Beverly Hills Cop II because Eddie was very loyal to him. But in after this thing happens with SNL, he begins to go back to stand-up, and he's discovered in the 1980s by MTV. And MTV goes into Catch and sees him, and MTV hires him to do these interstitial little videos at $500 a pop that are played by MTV in heavy rotation in the early 80s in between rock videos. And this puts Gilbert on the international and national stage because of MTV's deep penetration into pop culture. And people don't remember this, but this is when Gilbert begins to become nationally known simply from these little MTV segments. In 83 to 84, he starts to do Thick of the Night with Alan Thicke. I don't know if people remember Alan Thicke. And he begins to do a show. Cinemax gives him a show, a half-hour comedy special, 1987, which I highly recommend. It's called Greetings from Gilbert. It comes out of a trailer. He's like in a trailer park in Florida with pink flamingos. It's called the Comedy Experiment, I think, on Cinemax. It was a series that they did. Um, and that was 1987. 1987 also, he does a pilot called Norman's Corner. Now, this is an obscure pilot. It never aired. And it was Gilbert running a newsstand in Manhattan. And it's really an interesting, surreal story. This is Norman here playing him, the newsstand operator in Midtown Manhattan. It also goes, this is starring Gilbert Gottfried, yeah. It also dissolves into puppet characters where Gilbert is portrayed by a puppet or a claymation. Here's the claymation version of Gilbert in this show, which was highly avant-garde, highly experimental. He's got a crush on this supermodel who's on the cover of Bizarre magazine, and she's on the cover talking to him. There's a lot of surreal elements to this, and the reason I mention it, this is the claymation part of it. The reason I mention it is it was created and written by an obscure, unknown writer named Larry David. And this was before Seinfeld. This is 1987. Larry David could not get arrested, but they raised the money to shoot this entire pilot, which I think you can find on YouTube somewhere. So he does this Norman's Corner thing, and it doesn't really go anywhere. But in 1987, the same year, I think, I began to hook up with Gilbert at National Lampoon magazine. And Gilbert becomes a hanger-on in the office. He would just come up to the office and hang, which a lot of people did. Um, but we worked on a thing called the National Lampoon Dirty Joke Book together. And our assignment was, I think it was 88 or 87, we began to go out into New York City for a year. This was our assignment, Gilbert and I, which I think, hold on, let me see if I got it here. Yeah, this is the cover here. I got to send this one to Jackie. I promised Jackie the Joke Man I would send it to him. Gilbert and I did this thing for National Lampoon, National Lampoon's Dirty Joke Book. For a year, we went around the city of Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, compiling. Here's the cover page of me and Gilbert, and also the legendary Tony Kish, um, who also worked on this project. And it was a National Lampoon project that sold through the roof. If you could find this thing online, I'd urge you to buy it on eBay. So Gilbert and I together went our separate ways into the streets of New York for the course of a year and compiled this National Lampoon Dirty Joke Book. Gilbert then began writing a couple of weird articles for National Lampoon. I was there as an editor, of course. Gilbert was doing some freelance stuff for us. And he came with me. I don't know if he came with me when I created MTV Magazine. Now, MTV Magazine, we begin in 1989. In 1989, I create MTV Magazine for a couple of years with money from the Bertelsmann Music Group. The Bertelsmann Music Group funded the entire magazine, and MTV said, well, we're giving you our logo, and that's all we're giving you. And MTV ran the magazine. They were very cheap. However, that being said, we had a floor. We were on the executive floor on 45th and 6th, the old RCA building, which then became Bertelsmann because they bought RCA and they had the recording studio there downstairs that Elvis recorded in, and very famous recording studio. Anyway, we were on the 7th floor, and I hired all my friends, so I became like Jesus Christ to them, gave them medical benefits and everything else. So I became their savior. Maybe we could show a cover of one of the issues. I hired all these downtown artists. Instead of putting celebrities on the cover, I decided to use really avant-garde art for each issue. And the magazine, the circulation was about 250,000 right out of the gate because MTV was running commercials on TV for the magazine, which was their product. I had my own separate company. I didn't work for MTV, but we did have an executive floor. We were on the executive floor of Bertelsmann, which was the 7th floor, and we had an art room, we had office space, and blah, blah, blah. That being said, we had a premiere of the magazine, or a premiere on how we were going to show the magazine. And Gilbert was up there. There was food. I don't know what it was, like a magazine launch, I'd say, what you want to call it that. And he was in the art room with Ron Finkelstein, who was my art director. I went to Bard with Ronnie, changed his name to Fennell, obviously, for save, so he wouldn't be sent to Auschwitz, I guess. But anyway, Ronnie was in there in the art room with, and we had these big big Mac monitors. We part of the funding operation got us all these Macs, and we had one of the big ones in the art room, and we would create for the first time the first online uh, completely self-published magazine that we could then print out at a printer and mail out to 250,000 people. So we laid the whole magazine out on the Mac. This had never been done before. In fact, we would train a magazine called Entertainment Weekly on how to do it, a new magazine for Time Life, which was up the street. So nobody had ever done this before. And we created the entire magazine on Macintosh computers and then had it printed out. So anyway, so Gilbert's in there futzing around with the art with Ronnie, and I don't know what's going on, but the executive brass shows up from Bertelsmann, and they're all German, uh, hence the name BMG, the Bertelsmann Music Group. They were all Germans. They came from Germany to see this thing, and they come into the art room, which is this big room. A couple of MTV executives. Yeah, I'm just remembering this. Okay, so Gilbert doesn't know this is happening or this is coming. And they walk into a room with a giant Mac monitor with a giant swastika revolving on the screen, and Gilbert on top of the desk, dressed as a German soldier, giving a Heil Hitler salute to the executives of Bertelsmann. This is what they walked into that first day of the magazine. It went downhill from there, our relationship. But Gilbert was banned from the office for that particular event, and I don't know what was going through his head. I don't know if he knew they were coming in or what, but he came for the food, and he always came for the food. He would drag me to a place up the street called the China Bowl, and he would say, "Is this on your expense account?" And I would go, "No." And he'd go, "Good, I'm going to order twice as much food." And he was one of the cheapest guys in the history of show business. We were once in a cab going downtown, and I pulled out a $50 bill and I said, "Gilbert, I only have a 50. Can you get this cab?" And he said, "Let me look." And he pulls out 100 and goes, "Sorry, tough luck." He never paid for anything. We would go up to William Morris, and we were both clients at William Morris Agency in New York, and he would go up to see his TV agent who was there. I don't know where my agent was, but we would make a mad dash for the phone, so he could call or I could call the West Coast for free. And he would dive on that phone. He wouldn't let it go. That's how cheap he was. There's legendary stories about Gilbert's cheapness, but he did grow up, fairly impoverished. So it's not like this guy ever had opulent wealth. Okay, so 1983, 84, he does this thing. We go and begin to. Maybe we could show this. Let's take a look at this photo coming up here. I'm going to show you this. This is a shoot that I did with his sister Arlene Gottfried, and this was a time when they were looking for a new James Bond, and we decided that the new James Bond should be Gilbert Gottfried. So we went out and did this photo shoot out in Coney Island, which was one of the most hysterical things I've ever done because the cops were in on it. And the story was that Gilbert had a license to kill, but only in Brooklyn as James Bond 007. His license is revoked. And we'll try to put this up on the website so you can read it. As the print's a little small. But the people embraced him like he was, Elvis Presley. Because this was his home base. We were right in the belly of the beast in Coney Island at the amusement park. And these cops were so funny. I mean, the cop in shot number 4, they're lifting him up off the ground. He's getting a ticket from the cops. This was all improvised. The cops were, and then we put him on a jet ski. We had these Bond girls. That's the Ferris wheel in the back, the famous Ferris wheel at Wonder Wheel. at Coney Island. And then he was shooting, where you shoot to win a doll. All of the people involved, the concessionaires, were totally into this shoot. And it was shot beautifully by his sister, Arlene. And that's when I first met Arlene Gottfried, who would later or simultaneously be a photographer for the New York Times. She would also become, this is unbelievable. She will, just on a segment on Arlene, she will join the Harlem Baptist Choir and become the only white singer and, in fact, the lead singer of this church choir up in Harlem. Just an amazing woman, his sister. I don't know that much about Karen, but Arlene put out a lot of photo coffee table books of her photo work from the 70s and 60s and 80s in New York City. Highly recommend you check out Arlene's work. Her obituary in the New York Times is about 10 pages long when she died, I think in 2018 from cancer. But with Gilbert, we then took him to Shea Stadium. I don't know if we have a picture of this. This is from MTV Magazine. Again, we did another shoot with Gilbert at Shea Stadium. Maybe we could put that one up on the screen. Let me see if I can find a copy of it. It kind of looked like this, where Gilbert was a relief pitcher. This is black and white. It's in color, the copy that we have. Let me see if we can put that up. It was called The Big Pitch. And these are called fumettis, by the way. We did a lot of these at National Lampoon. Photo funnies, fumettis from the Italian. But we had fun with Gilbert doing this all the time. We put him in an MTV uniform. That's me in there lifting him up. On the bottom right here, I think that's me right there. And then we would put in these thought balloons for Gilbert to be, all the characters to be saying stuff. And I can't believe that Shea Stadium allowed us on the field. To this day, I find it shocking that Shea Stadium would allow a Dodger fan like me, because of the debacle of them losing in 1988. And on the scoreboard, it said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Debbie Gibson is being removed from the field with a minor injury. We wish her a speedy recovery and urge you all to pick up her new album, Electric Youth." And this is 998 now coming into pitch for MTV, Gilbert Gottfried. He was quite the trooper when we used to do these things. I remember running into him in Fox's cafeteria out here, but I'll get to that in a second. Gilbert and I put together a thing called the Gilbirds for Nickelodeon. It was an animated series. I dug this out yesterday. Here's a copy of it. Gilbert's a New York City cab driver, cantankerous, heart of gold, blah, blah, blah. But he plays a bunch of different bird characters. Gilbert constantly laments his station in life, and good reason. Whether it's being forced to drive executive owls to the bird baths on 14th Street, or having to shuttle arrogant young sparrows to late night discos, or being run ragged by old hens who can't seem to decide on which department store has the best sale on feathered caps, Gilbert is a human doormat for the ruling bird brain class. So the characters, it's animated, and all the characters are birds, as you can imagine. And Gilbert is their cab driver. There's Homie Pigeon, an inner city bird, very streetwise, big Baltimore Oriole fan. There's Al B. Tross, a legal eagle, can always bail everyone out of trouble. There's Bluebird, a saxophone playing jazz hipster bird. There's Connie Canary, a sexy songstress with a voice. Connie has a real crush on Gilbert. There's Perrault, the French pastry parrot. I haven't read this in like 30 years. There's Fordham Baldy, a leather-clad, ducktail, partially bald eagle from the Bronx, a real bully. There's Hawkeye. It goes on and on and on. And then I hired one of our illustrators to actually, which I'm going to have to find, I think it's in storage, actual drawings in color of all of the different birds. Nickelodeon thought we were insane. Of course, the project went nowhere. It was 1999. But this is something that Gilbert and I were trying to get made at the time, to no avail. But that being said, Gilbert begins to make a lot of appearances on Howard Stern, and one of the great appearances, to me, I mean, he's on there a lot, but when he used to do Andrew, Gilbert Dice Clay, I don't know what they're called. Here's a photo of Jackie in the background there. You see Robin, you see Howard. This is from their, I think, from the Channel 9 show, where Gilbert came out and did Gilbert Dice Clay, one of the great impersonations of all time, with the actual Dice jacket on. And even now when I see this, I start crying. I really do. Um, it was just so freaking brilliant the way he did it. And in his career, okay, this is Jaffe Cohen. I don't know why Jaffe Cohen was there. But in 1991, I produced the Toyota Comedy Festival in New York with the legendary Alan King, the first Toyota Comedy Festival. And I did the first Latino comedy night. This was at Art DeLugoff's place downtown. And also the first gay comedy night. And one of the gay groups was the Funny Gay Males. And this was the leader of the Funny Gay Males, gay male Jaffe Cohen. I don't know why he was on the Stern Show that day, but it was really awkward with Dice in character, with Gilbert as Dice. So you might want to check this out. But yeah, I mean, Gilbert begins to get into the movies. 1991, 1992, 1990, 91, 92, with Problem Child, with Aladdin. He begins to do also Beverly Hills Cop II. This is Aladdin. He plays Iago the parrot. As Beverly Hills Cop II, he plays Sid Bernstein, this loudmouth accountant. This is his first film. This never got released, by the way. This is with Tim Matheson from Animal House, a film called The House of God. I don't know what happened to it. It was a novel. It was never released. There's a bunch of films that Gilbert's in that, not surprisingly, did not get released. But Aladdin does get released. And he said to me he had a beat out. This is really weird. Now, keep in mind, he's playing, and he's in the sequels too. Iago, he beat out for the role Joe Pesci and Danny DeVito, for those of you at home. But Eddie Murphy does come through for him with Beverly Hills Cop 2, where he plays Sid Bernstein, the accountant. Here he is here. Great little turn in this movie, steals the movie. It's directed by Tony Scott, by the way, Ridley Scott's brother, who will later self-delete for whatever reason. This is Sid here. He takes out a couple of $100 and he bribes Eddie Murphy to get rid of the parking ticket so Eddie Murphy can use his computer and some sort of business here. But also in 1989 to 1998, especially in 90, 91, 92, he hooks up with USA Network with a chick named Rhonda Shear, and he does a show called Up All Night. I don't know if some people out there maybe remember Up All Night. And they show these obscure B and C level schlock horror films, and he riffs with her, scantily clad, with Rhonda Shear as the hosts of this late night cable TV show. And he was quite hysterical in that, folks. If you could ever find a copy, it ran for a long time. The first movie that ever ran was called Cheerleaders Beach Party, if I remember, because he was calling. Okay, first of all, let me just say this to you. Wherever Gilbert was on the road, he would call me, and he must have done this to others too, not just me. But he would call me at 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning from the middle of freaking Ohio somewhere. And he would simply say that I had to choose between 2 girls to have sex with. And the 2 girls were celebrities, and they were always immensely large. And he would add on descriptions to them, like Oprah and Rosie O'Donnell, and he would say I'd have to choose to have sex with one of the 2. And he would add on characteristics to them and descriptions where you were completely crying on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning in your underwear, just having been woken up by a phone call from the middle of Ohio. And we did this for years and years. And the phone would ring. I had no idea who it was. And it would be Gilbert with the same variation of the same bit. And I miss him for just that alone, those phone calls. But in 1999, what's that, October 1st, 1999, Gilbert had been on the Hollywood Squares a bunch of times. And oddly enough, the producer of the Hollywood Squares, which I did not know, was the center square Whoopi Goldberg. Somehow, Whoopi Goldberg's movie Grace runs out, and she ends up being the executive producer of the Hollywood Squares, making a fortune, by the way. And she gets Gilbert onto the show. To her credit, she is loyal to Gilbert from the comedy world, and she gets Gilbert the upper right hand corner of the Hollywood Squares, if you guys remember this. And also on the show, I mean, it rotated, but the Penn and Teller were together in a box, and Paul Lynde later, and all kinds of different characters were in there. But there was a period of time where Gilbert was in the Hollywood Squares. Okay, so one of the jokes was, one of the questions was, can you name the largest mammal, the mammal with the largest eyes in the animal kingdom? And Gilbert goes, that's easy. Marlon Brando at a buffet. And everyone cracks up laughing. And Whoopi Goldberg gets a call that night from Marlon Brando yelling at her. So she calls up Gilbert at home. And she says, Gilbert, I just got a call from Marlon Brando. And Gilbert's completely excited and says, what did he say? And he said, is this going to be a running joke? He was completely furious, Gilbert. And Gilbert says, well, it is now. And he tells dozens and dozens of jokes where Marlon Brando becomes the punchline on Hollywood Squares until October 1st, 1999, where 9 times in a row, I want to say 8, maybe 9, it's definitely 8 consecutive times in a row, he is the last square that they need to win the game. And the two contestants go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and he tricks them each time. And each time he deceives them, he screams out, you fool. He screams out, you fool. And that becomes a trademark. And he deceives them and they lose until finally, I think the 9th time, the guy got it right in the Hollywood Squares. I don't know if we have a picture of the Hollywood Squares, but mostly people know what it looks like. Different levels and the boxes there, ran for many, many years. He gets suspended from the show because of this incident. Here he is. Yeah, we're saying you fool. He's up in the upper right-hand corner, and they needed one more X to create tic-tac-toe in some sort of convoluted way. I don't know exactly why that was tic-tac-toe, but he gets suspended from the show for yelling repeatedly, you fool, at these idiots who completely believe him every time. And he's part of the game is that he's trying to deceive them from being, answering the question correctly. And he comes up with crazy answers. If you could find that on YouTube, knock yourself out. It's a lot of fun. So he gets suspended, but they bring him back. It wasn't like a lifetime ban like Dice got from MTV, and they brought Dice back. So I don't know about these lifetime bans. But Gilbert will now be involved. In 2001, there's a very getting on TV bans and getting suspended from things. In 2001, this is 2 weeks after 9/11, in New York, there is a roast for Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine. And nobody knows what to do. They were thinking of canceling it because of 9/11. Then they said, no, then the terrorists win. Then they canceled it. Then they restart. So they decide to do the roast. But nobody has laughed since 9/11. If you guys remember, Letterman, all of these people, the comedy clubs were closed. And they decide to do the roast. I think it was like a town hall in New York. It was a big room. There's a lot of people there, maybe 300 or 400 people who were at this roast. The host was Jimmy Kimmel, by the way, if I remember correctly. And Donald Trump was there. Patty Hearst was there. Dr. Joyce Brothers was there. Abe Vigoda. Adam Carolla was there. Dick Gregory. Alan King, my old partner from the Toyota Comedy Festival. Yeah, there it is. That's Gilbert. He's wearing a white. So, of course, Gilbert is selected to close the night because he is the number one comic. And all the other comics are bombing, and he's backstage wondering, what am I going to do here? I mean, they're not laughing. They're kind of like afraid to laugh, uncomfortable to laugh. Gilbert's kind of nervous about the whole thing. He told me, but comes out to close out this event. And I remember the first thing he said was, the first thing he says is, "Tonight I'll be using my Muslim name, Hassan bin Laden." And I just love that joke, especially the way he said it. I got a couple of laughs, not much, but he broke through. And then he said the famous joke, and he said, which reminds me, I have to leave early tonight because I'm going to Los Angeles. I couldn't get a direct flight. We have to make a stop at the Empire State Building. And somebody yelled out too soon. Gilbert thought the guy meant that the punchline was too soon, he told me. He thought, because there was a room of comics, that he thought the guy yelling out too soon was saying that because the punchline was too quick to the beginning of the joke. That's his interpretation. However, it does not go over well. There are hisses, there are boos, there are uncomfortability. There's a lot of people shuffling their feet. It does not go well. And he yells out, he says, what the fuck do you care? As a retort. And then in his brain, he decides to tell the filthiest joke in comedy history. And the filthiest joke in comedy history will become part of a film the next year, actually. And he tells a version of this joke, which will go down in history as the greatest version of this joke. And you can see the joke with every other comic explaining it in a film by Paul Provenza and Penn Jillette called The Aristocrats, which comes out a year later. In that film is Gilbert telling the joke that he then told after the airplane Empire State Building debacle joke. To save the night, Gilbert goes into the deepest crevices of his filthy, dirty mind to come up with the greatest telling of the dirtiest joke in American comedy history called The Aristocrats, which will go down in history that night and on film in immortality. And every comic agrees. Every comic in the film agrees. There has never been a greater depiction of the debauchery of the comic legendary joke, The Aristocrats, than the one told that night by Gilbert Gottfried at the Hugh Hefner roast in New York. And that I urge people to watch the film. Everyone you know is in this film. Carlin is in it. Every comic you could imagine is in this film. Howie Mandel, everybody. The Aristocrats is a fantastic look into the making of this joke. Now, that being said, Gilbert's career takes a nosedive after that, but he comes back and he begins to play Superboy. Not Superboy, he plays a character named Knick Knack on Superboy. But he's also a weird guy because he hoards toiletries from hotels. He, underneath his bed in New York, he had those, those plastic containers that would slide under your bed. They were filled with the toiletries of every 2-star or 3-star motel, hotel he ever stayed at on the road. He would take everything with him that was legally allowed, not stealing it. Anything he was entitled to take, he would take. And also at this time, he began, which was Letterman's favorite bit, where he does Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners doing Casablanca. And Gilbert used to do, now Gilbert used to work Caroline's because Caroline's was the number one upscale club in New York. And Caroline's, every comic would come from everywhere in New York to see Gilbert work in Caroline's. I went there one night and he had an opening act, this black kid. And I went backstage and I asked the black kid, "Where have you been? You were great." And he said, "I've been in prison." And I went, "Oh, that's awkward." And I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "David Chappelle." But that's a story for another day. But Gilbert would do Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners from Casablanca, and then he'd switch back and forth to Jackie Mason and Richard Burton doing it. But the Cramden one was the favorite of Letterman. And every time he was on Letterman, David Letterman insisted that he do Cramden. And I can't do it justice, but he would simply say, "You're getting on that plane, Alice. You're getting on that plane. I don't care about Victor Laszlo. A hill of beans, it doesn't amount to much. You're getting on that plane," or blah, blah, blah. And he would just nail this Cramden imitation from word for word from the scene from Bogart, saying, "You're getting on that plane." But he would switch it to Alice. Uh, anyway, so he begins to work a lot of comedy clubs at that time, and he begins to work for a company called AFLAC. And maybe that's where a lot of you people heard him. Here is Gilbert with the AFLAC duck, and he had a one-word routine which said AFLAC, and he was getting paid. And they made him. He was a very contentious relationship with them. They made him come in to re-record the AFLAC every single time. And he said, "Why? You have me saying it." And they would bust his balls to come in and record AFLAC. So he would begin to do slight deviations of AFLAC based on some emotion that he felt the duck would have. But he worked for them for like 5 years, 5 or 6 years. So dig this. This is a weird story. They had a Hall of Fame. I don't know if people know this, of commercial characters in the Hall of Fame. And in that Hall of Fame is Speedy, the Alka-Seltzer character, the California Raisins, Mr. Clean, the Jolly Green Giant. They're all inducted. This is the bird, but there's other characters, the California Raisins. There's apparently a Hall of Fame of commercial characters. And in that Hall of Fame are these other characters. So one day, or about the 5th year, they begin a proceeding to induct the duck into the Commercial Hall of Fame in New York. And they actually have a half-assed motorcade going up Madison Avenue where Gilbert is in a convertible throwing rubber ducks out of the car into the sparse crowd that's on the side streets of Manhattan while this motorcade is going somehow to end up downtown to be inducted into the Commercial Hall of Fame of commercial characters. I don't know if we have a few of the other commercial characters like the Speedy from Alka-Seltzer or remember the Rice Krispies? Here's Mr. Clean. We had the Rice Krispies, Snap, Crackle, and Pop. They were part of the situation too. There was all of these characters were Tony the Tiger. How many people remember Tony the Tiger? Inducted into the Commercial Hall of Fame. You have the raisin one. There's a picture. There's a raisin one and the Rice Krispies one. Are kind of cute. But anyway, he's in this motorcade, and the car that he's in gets separated from the parade by a bus and a taxi cab. And the next thing he knows, the car is headed down 9th Avenue, completely lost from the actual parade. And they're all waiting down at the bottom of the island, wherever this museum is, for him to show up with the duck. And it has nothing to do with him. The driver just got separated from the parade itself. And he's on board this convertible car with a bunch of rubber ducks lost going down 9th Avenue in Manhattan, which is on the west side for people who don't know Manhattan. And he couldn't figure out how the driver got so lost where they lost his parade from Madison Avenue. And it ended up downtown with him being late to this parade to induct the duck into the Hall of Fame. Okay. Now, that being said, there's a big tsunami in Japan. And Gilbert, to his credit, begins to make jokes about the tsunami. And some of the jokes he makes are, don't worry about dating. If you lose your Japanese girlfriend, another one will float by in a couple of minutes. There's what do Japanese Jews like to eat? And the answer is Hebrew national tsunami. AFLAC's not happy about this because unbeknownst to Gilbert, they have a huge insurance business in Japan and they're paying out through the nose. And Gilbert is fired unceremoniously by AFLAC, then replaced by a guy who sounds exactly like him for AFLAC. Gilbert will sue AFLAC, saying they're merely impersonating him. they will cite these tsunami jokes. But Gilbert told me the year before, when he was renegotiating his contract, a year before the tsunami jokes, they had threatened to replace him, saying we could get anybody to do the voice of the duck. They threatened him in the contract negotiations, and he believed that, in fact, they did use these tsunami jokes to get out of his contract, which was building and building and building. Japan is really advanced. They don't go to the beach. The beach comes to them. I just split up with my girlfriend, but like Japanese say, another woman fly by. Yeah, this even gets to The View, where they're on The View, and Whoopi Goldberg begins reading the jokes, and the audience begins laughing at the jokes on The View. But AFLAC used this to get out of, I believe, the contract with Gilbert, which was becoming enormous. In 1997, it was a couple of years before, he begins dating a chick named Dara Kravitz, who was a record executive. I didn't even know about this. He kept it kind of secret. He dated her for 10 years. He doesn't marry her to 2007. I met her once out in LA. I was completely flabbergasted. Then he had a wife. I remember maybe there's a picture of Dara here. This is Dara. She's a doll. You may want to watch a movie called Gilbert that she's featured in. It's a documentary on Gilbert Gottfried. So she dates him for 10 years and then gets married to him in 2007 in a Jewish wedding. They will eventually move to Boca Raton, Florida. But I met her at this event out here in LA, which I'll get to in a second. But he publishes a book in 2011 called Rubber Balls and Liquor, which I highly recommend. It's a autobiography written by Gilbert about his life. There's a lot of jokes in there, a lot of good stuff. But he begins to develop a family, which I had no idea. And he gets these two young kids. It's just absolutely shocking because he's such a childlike. Maybe we could show this picture here. That's Lily and I think Max on the left, Lily on the right. They're in their 20s now. But he, oddly enough, is a great family man and develops this two kids and this beautiful wife, Dara, who takes care of him. And he still goes on the road doing stand-up all over the country. He also develops this podcast called The Amazing Colossal Podcast, which he does with a friend, and they bring on various comedy people, show business people to be interviewed, which I think you could possibly still find online. You could go to gilbertgottfried.com. Here's a copy of the book. Yeah, the book is great. If you want to listen to the audiobook version, I think it would be much more entertaining for you if you're a Gilbert fan. Because he has jokes on the audio that are not in the book. But I think he did a bunch of Sharknadoes too. I don't know. He was once kidding about doing not the first Sharknado, but some of the sequels to Sharknado. But Gilbert loved show business. He didn't even consider himself part of show business. It's kind of a weird thing because he's in it, but he's totally like an outside kid looking in through a candy store window. And every time he met someone, one time he saw Carlin in first class on the plane and he went up and Carlin got up and came to him and said, please don't disturb me. I have to take a nap. And he was like crushed, and he went back to his seat. But before the plane landed, Carlin got up again, came back and gave him his home phone number and said, please call me the next time you're going to be on TV. I really want to see how that insane mind of yours works. And Gilbert was so enamored that Carlin did that. Just a great moment in his life. And just meeting all these celebrities. One of the great moments was he's backstage at the Tonight Show and this guy yells, Gilbert, Gilbert. And he turns around and it's Harrison Ford. And he's dumbstruck that he doesn't know what to say. He's really speechless or starstruck that it's Harrison Ford at the peak of his career yelling Gilbert. And Harrison Ford goes into this long soliloquy of how great Gilbert Gottfried is. And he literally doesn't know how to respond. It was just so overwhelmingly gushing by Harrison Ford that Gilbert looks up to him. And I hope I do this justice. Gilbert simply says, "And you are?" And Harrison Ford doesn't get it and begins to explain who he is to Gilbert Gottfried, who's now even more embarrassed that Harrison Ford did not get the joke. And Harrison Ford begins to tell Gilbert Gottfried his credits. So he doubles down stupidly, Gilbert, and said, "How about if I send you a copy of my new DVD, Dirty Jokes?" And Harrison Ford says, "Sure." And it was one of these great celebrity encounters that are awkward for Gilbert every single time almost. But Leno loved him. Leno had him on the Tonight Show many times, playing Star Wars characters, uh, uh, doing all kinds of different sketches and things. They would fly him out from New York at a drop of a hat, and he went out there and he would do these sketches. Letterman had him on a million times. Stern over 100 times. He loved doing these show business things. And one of my favorite bits that he did, which of course I can't do justice for it, but he would do this dream sequence, and I saw him at I saw him at the Bottom Line. I saw him many times, Caroline's, a lot of times where I hung out with him and was with him just hanging. Um, he did a bit, a dream sequence where he's in a dream and he enters the land of the three named people, and he riffs off like 20 actors and actresses with three names like Tommy Lee Jones, Billy Bob Thornton, David Lee Roth, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Jessica Parker. And he says, and I'm running from them, and I'm running from them. And I enter the land of the pretentious two initial people. And there I'm confronted by E.G. Marshall, J.T. Walls, J.K. Simmons, D.B. Sweeney. And he adds like 20 more just riffing. And he's running through this dream sequence. And he says, now, all of a sudden they're yelling death to the man who does not have three names. And he says, I enter the land of the one name people. And there I run into Bono and Cher and Madonna and Prince and Sting. And he adds like 20 more on. People would cry, openly cry, in comedy clubs when he would do this routine. Just one of the greatest comics of all time. I don't think he ever really got his due because he did these pop cultural type movies like Problem Child, or where he's doing these bit parts that are over the top. Aladdin, he obviously did a lot of animation. His Problem Child, which is not a bad movie, by the way, with John Ritter. And as I said, Michael Richards, there he is with John Ritter, Gilbert, on the set. He was so enamored with movies. He loved movies. He loved working. He would work in any movie that would ask him to, simply because he loved movies. And he was working at the top of his game. I mean, this is here he is obviously with Travolta and Look Who's Talking 2, the baby movie. The sequel, Look Who's Talking 2, which he was in, with the two babies who talked. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously from Ford Fairlane with Dice, which we covered during the Dice episode, where Gilbert plays an outrageous shock jock and gets blown to smithereens early in the movie. The reason I know is because I was with him the night of the premiere, and he said, "Let's get out of here." And I said, "Gilbert, I want to see the rest of the movie." And he said, "No, there's an after party with food." And he wanted to get to the buffet before anyone else. Now he gets blown up in the first 30 minutes of the movie. So we had to leave. He was my date, or I was his date, for the premiere in New York of The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. But he dragged me out of there to get to the buffet. There was never a buffet. This is with Arsenio Hall, who will later pour a glass of water on his head. Despicable prick, Arsenio Hall. Gilbert absorbed it and didn't make a thing out of it. Arsenio Hall was such a disgusting individual. This episode, I just really was not a fan. Not a fan. But um, Gilbert was a trooper, and he would show up and do these bits. Here he is with Leno, a lot of Leno. At one point, he told me he got locked in the bathroom, and nobody came to his rescue. He got locked in the bathroom backstage at the Tonight Show, and he had to use a garbage can as a sledgehammer to break a hole in the wall and crawl through a tiny hole to escape. Can't make this up, people. He was yelling and screaming, banging on the wall as long as he could, and finally started to dig his way out using the garbage can. And there's a photo of it I've seen of him sticking his head out like The Shining, and he crawled out of this hole and came on the show with Jay Leno, who loved him. Um, there he is as Yoda. That's a good one. Yeah, there's a good one. I got to tell you this story because he is in Ohio, and he's at some two-bit hotel in Ohio, and they're having a convention of World War II reenactors. And he goes downstairs, and there are 30 members of the Third Reich dressed in Nazi uniforms as reenactors, as part of this reenacting weekend. And he thinks that he is in a bad nightmare. And they come up here, here he is with one of the members of the Third Reich, acting as a member of the Third Reich, who has a joke to tell him. And it was like the greatest night of Gilbert's life that he stumbled into this. There is a photo. Maybe you could show the photo of him with the whole group. I want to show you this photo. Look at this. This is Gilbert at one of his proudest moments, I think, with these reenactors. These are not Nazis. But holy crap, was he like a kid in a candy store for this event? Look at this. This was one of Gilbert's finest moments. Even the Nazi in the right-hand corner is cracking up. But holy cow, did he have a good time that trip. Again, they just happened to be in the same hotel as him. But nobody loved the Nazis more than Gilbert did. And when I say love, I mean as a cultural bazaar icon. He knew what they were, as most Jews do, and he would make jokes about it. Gallows humor type jokes. But he was well aware that he'd be put on that train to Auschwitz if they came back, and we talked about it privately many times. But yeah, I miss him a lot because it sometimes when somebody passes away who has so much material out there, you don't really get to grieve properly because you see him all the time. And it's only been a couple of years. In 2022, when he passed away, they said it was related to muscular dystrophy. They said it was cardiac arrhythmia. But I know for a fact that Gilbert had 3 COVID shots in a row. And I can't believe that at his age and that heart, and not that he had anything wrong with his heart before this, he had once had a burst appendix years before, have nothing to do with anything. Um, but I always thought it was related to COVID, and people can think what they want. It's just my personal opinion. But before he died, his wife went under the bed and found this artwork that I want to show you right now. This artwork is so spectacular. This is the secret artwork of Gilbert Gottfried. And I want to show you some of these etchings and ink drawings that he did because they're so complex and so advanced that she brought in a art expert from the museum in Brooklyn to judge them, including Drew Friedman, who I know from National Lampoon, who was a huge fan of Gilbert's art. She discovered these prints, and you could see them at gilbertgottfried.com. I just want to show you a few of these if we can roll through some of his work here. Take a look at how in-depth this artwork was. And it was, in a lot of ways, Fritz the Cattish, a lot of ways Crummish, and a lot of ways Joe Coleman-esque, if you know these references. If not, there's Gilbert Gottfried's signature in the upper left in the bottom left-hand corner. If you could just take a look at these for a second. These are amazing. Some of them are just black ink. Some of them are in color. You can find all of them and purchase the ones you like at gilbertgottfried.com. They're spectacular. They were never exhibited, never shown. His wife found them near the end of his life. This is who he was, this graphic artist that nobody knew about, making these spectacular art pieces, was who he was going to become if it wasn't for stand-up comedy. Now, obviously, people paint and do stuff and have side hobbies. He did not exhibit these, and I was shocked. I had never seen these before, and I'm seeing them for the first time this year. But they are, look at this. I mean, this is so intricate, and some of these are obviously much bigger than what you're seeing here. Wow. Wow. This is one of my favorites here. I think there's one of them he calls Mo, Larry, and Curly. This is not it, but there's one that he calls Mo, Larry, and Curly. And there's people in these things. These are a lot of famous monsters that are in there. Yeah, look at that. Yeah. Just really, really intricate work that Drew Friedman did also. Yeah, look at this here. This is very, very interesting in that time period. If you want to take a look at Drew Friedman, let me see if I have a. It's a book by his brother Josh Allen Friedman, who was a Lampoon writer. But the artwork is Drew Friedman's work, and Drew Friedman agrees that Gilbert had this immense illustrative talent, and both of Friedman's work with us at Lampoon. Um, um, but Drew agrees that this, and you can look at Joe Coleman stuff also. I have an episode of Joe Coleman up on the other website if you want to take a look at that. The other channel, the guy who blew himself up on stage is also a great artist, sketch artist. But yeah, this is just fantastic stuff by Gilbert, and this is part of his secret life that I really wanted to get out there, including his sister's secret stuff that I didn't know about. Like I said, I think the last guest on his show was Brenda Vaccaro, and then Gilbert got sick after that and went to the hospital and lingered for a while and passed on. But I miss him. I really do. I mean, like I said, if you could, you're. It's hard to grieve properly. I think for somebody who is out there on so many different platforms and hearing him as if he's still alive. Now, it's only been like 3 years. In my time, that seems like 3 days ago. But nevertheless, his wife now has the two kids. The kids are in their 20s, I think Max and Lily, and I think they live in Boca, um, if I remember correctly. But he was just, and despite his immense talent, underrated. Really, really an underrated talent. And there was an interview I just heard with Terry Gross from Fresh Air, and she's trying to break through the persona. And Gilbert, of course, won't let her break through the persona. And she is just can't stop laughing as he's preventing her from breaking through. So if you find that one on NPR, also a very interesting interview with Gilbert. But again, this is just to revisit his life and to let people know just who this guy was, because it's only been a couple of years since he's left us. And I hope you enjoyed the show. There's a little thing we want to put up here at this time. Here's a photo that I really love of Gilbert. Um, really an innocent photo. And here's something to leave you with at the end here. Okay. That being said, I just want to thank everybody for today's show. Let's see if we can deal with some product right now. I think we've got a little bit of this product over here that I wanted to talk about, which is maybe somebody's got some comments here. Christopher Ebden. Wow. Thank you, Christopher, for that. That's really helpful because we're a new channel. I really appreciate that. Gifting us 10 membership. Rose, way to go, Rose. Catherine the Great is back again. Catherine the Great, thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'll see if I can answer them. I don't know if we covered it or not, but there's any questions or any chatty kind of stuff. Thank you, Dustin, old friend of the other show, is back. Um, yeah, this is what we're going to do. I mean, I don't know. I think there might be an audience for this. I'm not really sure, but it feels fun for me to do it. Like I said, Richard Lewis next week. We're going to get into that. Another old friend who's left a little too soon, in my humble opinion. But any questions at all? We'll get into this incredible coffee. I wanted to mention this thing here because I got a note from the owner saying, "We hope you enjoy our new coffee. The grinds are roasted here in Texas by the on the family farm from Papua New Guinea. This is a customer of ours. The best coffee we've ever had." And this is tribal coffee from the same company that brings you the biltong, and you get 10% off of this coffee with the Mark G code. The coffee is unbelievable. I don't know how coffee gets made. I'm not really sure. But this is from Papua New Guinea, which I couldn't find on a map, and from the Western Highlands. I don't think there's a comedy club there, but if there was, I guarantee you, Gilbert Gottfried would have worked that comedy club. There was one he told me that he worked in Canada that had no heat, and everybody had to perform and wear snorkel jackets and parkers during the being in the audience and on stage. Um, our coffee brings out the exquisite, rich taste of the region's coffee, known for the high citrus, zesty fragrance, and dry cocoa leaves. It is a perfectly balanced cup of premium coffee, Arabica mountain coffee suited for all your drinking occasions. Simply chose the roast. Yeah, but I just want to point out, it's got this secret strip here, and I'm an idiot. I couldn't see that there was a little pull tab right over here. And for a number of months, I was just ripping open the top. But if you get this coffee in the mail, there is a secret little tab here that allows you to zip it, and it keeps it fresh when you seal it. And I, of course, stupidly did not find that until Alan's on the board. Welcome, Alan, out of Poughkeepsie, New York. There used to be a club up there, I think, where Gilbert worked, a comedy club, Sal's Last Chance. Um, but the coffee has this Ziploc little thing, which I'm only telling you because you may be as knuckleheaded as I was and not find it for years. But you will get 10% off with that secret code Mark G for this coffee. Just try one bag. You see, and if you don't like it, you get I'll let you go. But try one of them. I'm telling you, it's really freaking tasty. Anyway, if anybody has any chat material or questions or statements, other than that, we've got quite a few people here still hanging out. What's going on here? Scott H., Robin Christmas, Ohio Pat is here. Yosemite Sam, Rondell, who I think changed his name. Love the channel. Christopher Ebden. Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Mike Schaefer's here, number 81. He's been here before. Charlie Sheen and Rogan talking about JFK. Yeah, I'm going to take a look at that another time. This is a comedy channel here, so we're talking comedy. Unless they play the Red Sox. Thank you. Hit the peeves. Mark, can I hire you to be my fashion consultant? Tim, you're going to have to watch the show and just copy it. Lucy W. in the house. Here's Charlie and Gilbert. He said to me he never really knew Charlie Sheen. He just posed for this picture. He didn't really know him. But the other people he does know. He did not know Charlie Sheen, by the way. Mike Schaefer. Let's see here. Dave DeMoss. I own a microwave oven. This guy's talking about. Okay, that's interesting. Arlene Armstrong. Mike Schaefer. Let's see who else is here. Yosemite Sam does a great thing. Bitter End is still there. Yeah, didn't Gilbert? Yes. There's a lot of shows. He was on Night Court. Dude, there's so many shows he was on, like these one-offs, that it goes on and on. Gottfried, thank you, Nadine, in New York City. Absolutely brilliant comedy rendition of Dracula. I forgot about that. Holy crap, was that funny? He did it on Stern. Got a lot of his PGAC podcast available. Frank is a library. Oh yeah, like his partner was Frank. Looks like Freddie Prince's coke dealer. That's not far fetched. Geraldo without the hair lip. That's funny. That's funny. When's Jackie coming back? The first of never. That's not going to happen. I think Jackie got as much in as he could say in the span of 2 hours. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. So Jackie will not be returning. I love Jackie. He got his shot. Yeah, Thick of the Night was the only reason I watched Thick of the Night was for Gilbert. Me too. National Lampoon spin-offs were fantastic. I didn't know that was you. Yeah, it was me in the spin-offs. Um, I don't know what these spin-offs are. My photos have been in lots of MTV docs and specials, so I wonder if you used any of my shots in your MTV publications. That I don't know. If we did, we paid you. I did see Gilbert's cameos. Oh yeah, he was doing cameos during COVID to make money. I did not see them. Of your favorite comedians. Yeah, I'm doing it now, Pyro. This is what it is. I'm doing bio comedies of my favorite comedians as we speak. Um, Very cool. Great scene, Mark. You ever meet up with Jackie Mason? Yes, I did, and I will be doing an episode on Jackie Mason. Um, Somewhere along the line here, I did meet up with Jackie Mason, and I have a show that we're going to do about Jackie Mason. I don't know. There's a guy in there. I don't know what he's doing in there. He's a Puerto Rican. He's supposed to be funnier than me. I don't have to come here. Yeah, I did have a good time with Jackie Mason. Thank you, Catherine. Hold on. Let's see here. Bob Saget. We're going to do a show on Bob Saget. Um, Gilbert played New York City's last Toreador. I don't know what that means. Heather Whatever is here. What is the Duck's motivation? Yeah. Any books written about Gilbert? Yeah, this book I was just telling you about, which is right here. Rubber Balls and Liquor. That's the book you should buy. Um, and the documentary is called Gilbert, which I highly recommend. American Dreamer. I don't know what that means. Daisy Girl. Outstanding episode. Finger Red #1. I meant to say that his voice was the same as the Grinch. Well, he could have been doing the Grinch. Let's see here. Jay's a pro. Yeah, Jay was really professional with him. Um, Stand your face. Well, very cool. The Gottfried art reminds me of Aztec and Mayan art. Maybe there is some Mexican in Gilbert. Why was he enamored? Who Keith Chuck hockey player? What does that even mean, Ralph? What are you trying to say here? Um, Gifted 10 memberships. Great show. Great show. God bless. Love the new channel. $10. Coffee is difficult. Doesn't flour for 7 years. Heather, coffee expert. Yeah, somebody's figured it out. When is Jackie coming back? Okay, good for Jackie. We are going to have Larry Charles back because we did not finish. Robin, thank you again. Robin Christmas for $20. We did not finish, Larry Charles and I, the interview part 2, which will be about his films. We only got up to Borat at that point. So I don't know about showing Joe Franklin, but um, Joe Joe Franklin might have done something to Sarah Silverman, according to Sarah Silverman in the Aristocrats movie, which I highly recommend. This Joe Franklin is a interesting character, but not really one of my comedy heroes. Um, but we will bring him up because I am having Dave Rubin on to talk about his comedy career in a couple of weeks, just about comedy with Dave Rubin. And Dave Rubin had a very close relationship with Joe Franklin. In fact, opened a comedy club called the Joe Franklin Comedy Club. Um, so that'll be interesting. Great stuff. Thank you. No, thank all you people. So that's it. 3, 4. I think that's a show, right? What else do we have here? We have anything else to talk about? I think we'll be back next week. I'll be on the other thing on Friday where we'll discuss the other stuff. Um, Jimmy Kimmel got the axe. Well, that was coming. I might have predicted that. If not, look at my earlier predictions, folks. Um, what do you think Gilbert would want to be remembered for? I think the impersonation of movie monsters. His 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 impersonations of the movie monsters, and he loved Gleason. I mean, he loved those. He loved those impersonations, and he loved going on Stern. In fact, one of the only people to visit him in the hospital when he had his appendicitis attack was Howard Stern. Oddly enough, Penn Jillette visited him, and he said, it was awkward because he didn't even know Penn Jillette, but he appreciated that Howard showed up in a hood with sunglasses, trying to make believe that nobody could tell that he was Howard Stern. But he felt very comfortable with Howard. He really did, for better or for worse. Um, how about a story about Gleason? I don't. I guess story about Gleason. We may do an episode on Gleason at some point. We're going to get into Jonathan Winters. Milton Berle's going to get an episode. How he was banging my aunt Sophie at the Winter Garden. So there's a lot of stuff we're going to get into. It's going to take a long time, folks. All right, I got to get out of here because I got get ready for this Dodger game and do my warm ups before the game. But please like and subscribe to the episode. I don't think it's too much to ask. You're asking me for an episode on Gleason, Tim, but it would really help if you subscribe to the channel. I know it's a lot to ask. We barely know each other, but it may help us get these other guests to come on the channel in bigger names. And liking it does something for the algorithm, so I'm not sure what the like does, but apparently, Tim Van Gogh, if you can like the channel, maybe we'll get to Gleason at some point. Here's Bob Tranquilli. He would want to be remembered as a family man. Yeah, probably so. I don't know. I don't know that. Maybe, maybe. People say that, but I'd hate to interpret it that way. This is just my opinion. I don't really know because nobody ever says anything about that before you go. Yeah, the Dodgers are in a dark place. But thanks, Bob, and thanks, Rondell. I appreciate your name change, and I guess there's a reason for that too, from what I read. Okay, so I'm going to get out of here. See you guys next Wednesday. See you on Friday on the other channel. And let's just end it at this point before somebody gets hurt.